Welcome into the Hot Read podcast live on a Tuesday, November the 5th. I am your host, JT Ruhnke, writer and reporter here at Broadway Sports Media. You can follow me on Twitter at JT_Ruhnke. Once again, joined by my lovely co-host, Stoney Keeley, the editor-in-chief of Sobros Network, 1/3 of football and other F-Words podcasts on 104.5 The Zone, and co-writer over at Stacking the Inbox. Stoney, how are you doing, my friend, on a very busy Tuesday? And the biggest event of the day has already gone by us in the trade deadlines. Your thoughts on what has been an already wild and crazy trade deadline day?
Well, first of all, I'm just happy to be celebrating a Titans win this week.
This
It
is
feels
also true. It's a Victory Tuesday for us.
pretty damn good. I started to think nothing was really going to materialize for the Titans at the trade deadline when the talk got real hot last week, and some of the reported names that were out there were being discussed, like Arden Key, Harold Landry, Jeffrey Simmons. Once we started getting the reports that there was no interest in really trading Jeffrey Simmons and nothing really moved on Harold Landry, I kind of thought things would cool down a little bit. And then I don't know, man, seeing this team go out and win the way that it did, it kind of made me think, you know what, this locker room really seems to be gelling right now. And I don't know what they're actually going to get to compensate for the chemistry that they're building. So I kind of sat this morning and was like, yeah, you know what? I don't think they're going to make any moves today.
Yeah, and, there was a little bit of buzz around, a couple of players here who could have been moved today. Diana Rossini reported at times that Jeffrey Simmons, Arden Key, and Sebastian Joseph Day were a trio of defenders that the Titans had received calls on, and Diana following it up with by saying, I had one team say today we gave Tennessee a call just to check on Simmons, but we knew the answer before we even picked up the phone. It was a firm and strong no. And I think when you really look at it, I mean, even Jeremy Fowler, it seems like the pieces that would have moved if there were going to be any moves today were either Arden Key or Sebastian Joseph Day, two guys whose contracts are not as big of a burden per se as maybe some of the other guys, even though the guaranteed money is not the end of the world for a new team. But, Arden Key and Sebastian Joseph Day being on, I believe, a 1-year deal, and Arden Key being on that he has 2 years left on his deal. But, the cap hit isn't the biggest thing in the entire world. Those seemed like the two guys who they would have, the guys they would have ended up trading, but they end up not, and they stay pat at the deadline here. Very quiet day, as so many other teams around the league were making moves. Probably the biggest team to make a move that is probably the weirdest trade I've ever seen in my entire life is the Dallas Cowboys trading a 4th-round pick to go get Jonathan Mingo. I woke up this morning and saw that news a little bit after I was awake, and it came across my desk and my timeline, and I said, excuse me? And so I tweeted out earlier today, I said, if you can move Jonathan Mingo, a guy who has, former 2nd-round pick, 39th overall last year, if you can move a guy like that, you can definitely move a Treylon Burks. And I think people, I don't think people caught on to my sarcasm. They were like, what do you mean? Treylon Burks is on IR, you idiot. Yeah, guys, I know. I was making a joke.
Yeah, you can't do that on Twitter.
You can't, I know, right? No longer can you be facetious and sarcastic on Twitter. But, like, trade deadline day has started to feel more and more like no one's safe, and people make the weirdest moves. To me, it was like a move that they made for next season and the season beyond. It's like Jerry Jones saw that Jonathan Mingo could be available, and he's like, well, we were going to spend a 2nd-round pick on him, but now we can get him for a 4th. That's a damn good deal right there. But why, I think, for the Titans, why were these guys not moved? And I think it's pretty easy to look at the guys that were mentioned today not getting moved as really a core part of this Titans team. They bring the guys between Jeffrey Simmons, Arden Key, Harold Landry, and even Sebastian Joseph Day. Those are guys who bring a lot of veteran presence to this team. And you talk about a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, who obviously DeAndre Hopkins needs no introduction. He's going to do what's best for him. And I think when you saw him get traded, there wasn't a shockwave around the locker room. It was pretty expected considering his age and where he is right now in his career. And even last night, he does that Remember the Titans celebration dance, which people were outraged by on Twitter. And he wakes up today and is like, no, that was an homage to you guys because you took so much care of me and like you set me up for success here and like put me on this path. And so, I hate the Kansas City Chiefs, but I will root for DeAndre Hopkins mostly because I would like to see him succeed. And also I'd like that 5th round pick to be a 4th for the Titans next year. And then you talk about a guy like Ernest Jones, who, you kind of flip him to upgrade some capital here. And, as much as a leader, he was becoming a leader in this clubhouse. He was on an expiring deal. How much can you really do with him? So those are two guys who, when you think about it in terms of the locker room chemistry, are pretty expendable guys. Guys like Jeffrey Simmons, Harold Landry, Arden Key, guys who were here through the bad times last year, the firing of Mike Vrabel, and now going through this new growing pains. Those would be absolute gut punches to a locker room that is riding high right now off a win. It feels like when I talked to them in the locker room, and I wrote about this for Broadway Sports Media after the game, even though it was a gross win and they should have beat that team by 3 or 4 more scores than they did, and it should not have been that close, and it still was not a great statement of a win. It was a win nonetheless, and you could watch Brian Callahan in the post-game press conference. You could walk into that locker room, and you felt just this release of stress, and it pressure had been finally let out. These guys were happy for once. They weren't just frustrated after the game. And so I feel like if you were going to trade one of those guys today, you have a locker room that's riding high. Trading one of those guys away kind of stops all your momentum, does it not?
Yeah, I agree with that, JT. And I think there's another layer of this that you haven't mentioned yet. It's the fact that these guys have actually been playing pretty good recently. I mean, yes. Sebastian Joseph Day has been pretty solid all season. I don't feel like he gets the due that he's deserved. I have been critical of Jeffrey Simmons at points this season, but this was his best game by far. I mean, yes. It was one of those like heart and soul type of performances from Big Jeff. 98 was out there laying it all on the line, much like Tony Pollard was on offense. And then Arden Key, much maligned Arden Key by this fan base, has really turned it on the last couple of weeks and is starting to really grow into his role. And I think he can actually be a pretty interesting piece for Denard Wilson's defense moving forward. And then Harold Landry's just doing Harold Landry things as well. I think you have a core of guys in place, and I'm not going to sit here and suggest that like the Titans are going to go on some big playoff push right here, but I think you bring up a great point where right now you rode some of these guys to this point, and now you see the relief in Brian Callahan's eyes, in his facial expressions, tears at the podium. You see that stuff over the relief of getting this win. I don't think you want to do too much to tinker with that, to jeopardize that for what are you going to get? I mean, what are we hearing? Like maybe a day 3 pick?
Yeah. Like I don't think there was a lot of, there wasn't a lot of big capital being moved. Like the biggest move today, I believe, was Marshawn Lattimore, a all-pro certified standout corner that is going to a legit contender. Zadarius Smith as well, which came earlier today. Those are way bigger
Jonathan
names.
Mingo to the Cowboys.
Yeah, Jonathan Mingo, right? Those are guys that deserve that capital, but I don't think you were going to I don't think you were going to get more than at least for in the case of Arden Key and Sebastian Joseph Day, that's a day 3 pick that I think you were going to get, or maybe a situation like we've seen a lot of today where you're sending a 2026 6th and you're getting a 4th or a 5th back, with sending Arden Key or a guy like that. And so that's kind of where I am. We clearly have some people here in the comments section that totally disagree with us on this one. And if you are joining us live here, either on Twitter or Facebook, do us a favor and head on over to the Broadway Sports Media YouTube channel, or the 440 Sports YouTube channel, where you can join people like Hingle McCringleberry and Stevie and Jake and Lewis and Joey and Daniel and Kenneth, who completely disagrees with us and says completely delusional talk.
Well, we gotta
upset since Will Levis threw that fumble backwards in the Jets game. What is Rand Carthon doing? I'd be interested to hear you flesh out your thoughts a little bit more, because I from a standpoint, I don't see. You look at a guy like Arden Key, right?
Yeah.
And here's the example, right? You probably could have gotten another fourth-ish for Arden Key, considering how he's playing right now. Look at the last 2 games that he's played. In the last 2, he's combined for 5 solo tackles, 3 assisted tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 4 quarterback hits, and a sack, and 2 forced fumbles. Like, this is a guy who seems to be finally figuring it out under this Denard Wilson defense. And is, we've been asking for a long time, hey, when is the pass rush going to start getting going? And it feels like, I think I speak for you, Stoney, but if I do not, this show, the Hot Read Podcast, is and will always a show where I'm not trying to take an emotional side here on this team.
Yeah.
I do what I see in the locker room, and I report based off that. And this is a team that does not care about the draft picks they have come April. This is a team that is continuing to focus on winning now and in this season. And the best way to do that is to get your guys under contract going. And in this example, Jeffrey Simmons, Arden Key, even Harold Landry, who continues to be a little bit of a cleanup artist. Maybe there is a different, explanation there. Like, that is a guy who, those are guys who are starting to come on and can make this team competitive, which is, at the end of the day, is something I think fans want to see, this team be competitive. I don't know about you, but I would like to, when I'm watching and covering these games, for them to be competitive instead of seeing them do what they did in the Lions game in the second half and lie down. And we're just waiting till April talking about the same 4 quarterbacks that the Titans may go get. Like, I just, that seems like a tough explanation for me, or it's a hard explanation for me to believe.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you still have to frame this within the compensation context. Like, I would have been fine if Rand Carthon had decided, hey, we're going to move Jeffrey Simmons for 2/3 or a second and a fourth or something like that. If they want to move Harold Landry for a third, I get it. Like, that makes sense. But at the same time, you're hearing from teams that called the Titans that the compensation was not something feasible for them. They couldn't do it. The Titans wanted a legitimate offer, a good offer to move off from one of these guys because of their importance to the locker room, to this locker room. And you look at it, like, I feel like we keep looking at these guys that we're discussing as potential trade assets as just expendable pieces, but each of these guys does bring something to the table that the Titans need right now. I mean, if you let Harold Landry and or Arden Key go, what's that going to do for your pass rush? If you let Sebastian Joseph Day or Jeffrey Simmons go, what's that going to do to your defensive front? Like, I know, like, I'm not optimistic on this team big picture, but I think if you really want to buy yourself some time as a staff, as a regime, you've got to win some games. You've still got to win some games. You're looking at around the NFL, you're starting to see some of these 2-win teams churn coaches. Las Vegas fires their offensive coordinator, their offensive line coach. The New Orleans Saints fired Dennis Allen, their head coach. You know that had to play part in Brian Callahan's emotion after this game. Seeing the results come in, you've got to get more of that if you want time as a coaching staff. So I agree in principle. Yeah, you want the draft picks, but at the same time, you got to kind of be smart about this. It's a delicate balance, and you still have to go out there and do something to show this owner that you're making strides as a football product on the field. You are getting better. So I have no problem with the decision to say, hey, we're not going to just take some, back into the draft pick for these guys because they mean something to our locker room. They're playing well right now, and we've still got to win some games this season to prove we can stick around. So to me, it was a pretty prudent decision to say, all right, you know what? We couldn't get what we wanted. Let's just batten down the hatches and ride this season out.
Yeah, and I think Kenneth here says, a 5th round pick became Jarvis Brownlee Jr.
in a good draft.
In a very good draft, yes. Arden Key has been invisible for 2 years. 2 games doesn't erase that. I'm not disagreeing with you there, but I think the counter argument to that part is that why does it have to be the end? Why can't this be just the beginning for a guy who's learning under a new system and is finally unlocking something? Will Levis has yet to win a football game, which I think is a whole nother can of worms that we are definitely going to dive in. Certainly, maybe at the end of this show, definitely on Friday's show, because I think once we get through whatever the hell is going to happen these next couple of days with the quarterback decision, that's going to be an interesting conversation to have there. But like you said, this is where the Titans stand right now with their draft picks, and it's the same place they stand after they traded DeAndre Hopkins and Ernest Jones 3 weeks ago now or so. Here's what they have into the 2025 draft. They have their first, they have a second, they have 2 fourths, one they got from Seattle in the Ernest Jones trade. They have their own 5th. They have a conditional 5th from Kansas City that can become a 4th if he plays 60% of the snaps. It sure seems like right now that DeAndre Hopkins will play 60% barring an injury. And it looks like maybe even a better bet that the 8-0 Chiefs have a really good shot to get to the Super Bowl. So you're looking at maybe potentially 3 fourths there. You have a 6th, and then you have a 7th from Green Bay in the Malik Willis trade. That's that's already a pretty deep draft. Like, there are teams like the Washington Commanders who have 9 picks. Like, once again, we can talk about how good Rand Carthon has been with his draft picks and what he's been able to do in the back halves of the rounds. But I mean, put it into hindsight right now. Let's talk about the 4 picks or the 5 picks that Rand Carthon, and I like Rand Carthon as a talent evaluator and what he can do finding hidden gems that maybe take some time to develop. But right now, you look at rounds 4 and beyond, Cedric Gray has not even played, he's not played a single regular season football snap yet. Jarvis Brownlee Jr. has been a diamond in the rough, and I really like him. That's a guy we thought was going to be really good coming out. Jaquan Jackson, I think, Stoney, we've been talking about this for a couple weeks. The reaction that myself, you, Easton Freeze, and Zach Lyons had on draft day continues to be right, because that has not been a hit whatsoever or even close to a productive player on him. And then you have the 7th round guys and James Williams, who I have not noticed him. And if he is on special teams, which he is, he's certainly not helping that out. And then Jalen Harrell, who made maybe 1 or 2 plays in the Detroit game, but really has not shown anything outside of the training camp bump that we saw. And so you can trade Arden. That's where I would ask Kenneth here. Would you rather have an Arden Key, someone who's proven, someone who's improving in this offense or this defense right now, making plays, making big time plays, a strip sack in this game to help them get over the New England Patriots? Or would you rather have a Cedric Gray, a Jaquan Jackson, a Jalen Harrell, a James Williams, or maybe the 1 in 5 hit that is a Jarvis Brownlee Jr.? Like, that's where I think that only stacking all these picks makes so much sense once you get to a certain point with them. No?
If you had an extra 5th round pick, would you draft Arden Key with a 5th round pick? I mean, absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. So let's just eliminate the middle step there. You've got an Arden Key. You don't have to invest a draft pick in him. Like,
right.
I go back to the value, and I just say, I'd rather have the guy that has played in the league, that has the tools, that has the traits, that is starting to show some signs of life, than I would essentially start from scratch with what would essentially be another Jalen Harrell, so to speak. And I like Jalen Harrell. I think he's contributing on defense. He's playing a lot of special teams too. I think he can develop into a fine role player for this team. But he's not going to step in and replace Ruhnke or Harold Landry right now. And I think that's the conversation we're having.
Same thing with Sebastian Joseph Day. Like, he has been really good for this team and is playing really good football right now. Take him out. Like, Keandre Coburn has shown flashes, but he's been hurt. Like, that's a huge hole. Like, James Lynch is playing decently. Like,
hell yeah.
I don't know if I would prefer Sebastian Joseph Day not to be on this team and then have James Lynch and Keandre Coburn playing consistent snaps every single down. Like, that does not make me confident. But Kenneth, he does go on here and he says, this team saw what you guys did. They have a full slate of divisional round games on the schedule and foolishly talked themselves back into the race. And I don't think they've talked themselves back into any race. This is a team that just wants to win some games because there are no playoff aspirations right now in that building. At least from what I've seen. This is a team that simply has seen over the last 6 weeks them get basically embarrassed time and time again, and a team that simply cannot execute the simple game of football. And now you saw that team finally execute, to an extent, a game of football, albeit versus an opponent pretty bad, just as bad as them. And so I do think that this team is not playoff hopeful, but they still want to play for pride. They're still playing for their jobs.
I was about to say,
day in and day out. And I think that's the
jobs are on the line.
But I think the bottom line here is that, like you've said for the last 2 weeks, the reason why, Ruhnke and maybe Jeffrey Simmons and Harold Landry have not been traded today or before today, because the bones of this team are pretty good. Like, they got good bones. They got strong, healthy bones. They've been drinking their milk. They've been doing it every single day because they got strong, calcium-rich bones on this team. And I think that's something that Ran Carthon and this team definitely want to build off of.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that this team desperately needed some proof of concept that the way they were doing things, if they could just clean up the mistakes, if that fifth guy that I keep talking about on this show, where 4 guys do their job and the fifth guy is just catastrophically bad. If that fifth guy just keeps cleaning up some mistakes, we can see this offense run efficiently. And I think we saw it against the Patriots in that touchdown drive to start the game that they had to go up 7-0. That's the full extent of that offense. Even the one that ended with the interception that should have put them up 14-0, that Chigakonkwo drops the pass. Mason Rudolph throws it a little high. I think you can displace blame across both guys, but the result was an interception. Bad luck, Titans again. And then in overtime, when the team just decided they were just going to roll their sleeves up and put a little elbow grease in that thing and march down the field and win the ball game in overtime. I think you saw glimpses of how good this offense can be. And JT, I don't want a victory lap just yet. I don't want to pat ourselves on the back too much, but back late in the summer, in the preseason, when we started seeing, hey, the passing game's not really clicking like we thought that it would, and we're looking at the personnel and we're saying, man, you know what? This team's really built to run the ball well and play defense. And that's what the Titans are doing right now. And I think that is their path to being competitive. Those are the foundations that you can build off of if you're the Titans. You need all hands on deck. You need all the horses you can. You don't have too many thoroughbreds right now, but you can build out the stables as the years pass, but you've got to win enough games to get to those moments. So I don't know, man. I think jobs are on the line. I think this team is just going to keep trying to gut these wins out and get them where they can, because we know or we believe that the bones are good, and if they just keep sticking to their plan, the wins are going to come.
Yeah, I agree there. Yeah, I think that's where I think we'll end the trade conversation, unless anybody else wants to chime in. I see we have a lot of people in our chat that are just giddy with excitement, saying the playoffs are back on. We're going to Super Bowl. No, Lewis, you're great. Thank you for being here. We appreciate you over here, but that's just simply not the case. I think with this team.
It's just a product of the schedule at this point too.
Right. I think you can probably expect with this team 3 more gutsy wins Like, I feel like the Jacksonville game is going to be a slog, and maybe that's something.
Yeah.
Both Jacksonville games are going to be ugly, gross, and I don't want to be a part of any of those. But hey, you know what? That it is what it is. But I do think that this team can probably sneak out and eke out a couple more wins for sure.
My path, I wrote about this on Stacking the Inbox, and my path to another off season with this regime and nobody losing their job or anything like that was they've got to win one of these games between like the Patriots, the Bengals, the Chargers, somebody
Vikings.
else. I had the Vikings in another tier, but you got to win one of those games. You got to split with the Jags. And then I think if you rise up and upset and surprise a team like the Vikings, the Commanders, or the Texans, I think it'll go a long way in kind of restoring some faith in this program right now. So I think, like, for me at this point, you've got that win over the Patriots. Now, if you can split with the Jags, if you can maybe win another divisional game, beat up on the Colts a little bit, and then if you rise up and surprise one of these teams that you're going to be a major underdog against, maybe even next week against the Chargers, if you get that done, I think that's when we'll start to see the hope and optimism maybe come back to this fan base and probably to ownership as well.
Yeah, and whether win or lose, we have just the place for you to go after these Titans games every single week. That is our wonderful and amazing sponsors, Sinkers Beverages, located in East Nashville, who have been serving that East Nashville community for over 40 years. They are a Best of Nashville Liquor Store of the Year 4 times running. Got to go check them out because they simply have the best selection of spirits, wine, and beer that you could possibly ever need, especially on a day like today. I know the stress and the anxiety of a trade deadline day certainly can amount on all of us here. But don't worry, we got you because Sinkers Beverages is here to help. Got to join their in-crowd as well for special benefits, allocations, and bi-weekly tastings that you only know about when you sign up for their in-crowd. You got to give them a follow on social media at SinkersBev on X or Twitter, and then sinkers.nashville on Instagram. And then don't worry, if you can't make it out there because you're too busy, they got you. They deliver the booze to you. Simply search Sinkers on Uber Eats, and they drive so you can drink, I might add, rather responsibly. Thank you to Sinkers Beverages for sponsoring the show. Also have to give a shout out to Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville, serving that location for over 50 years. I see you're sipping on something. Would you like to share what we got today so far?
What we have today, it's just a little red wine. It's a red blend. I think it's
wonderful.
Dreaming Tree, just basic stuff. My wife loves it, and I just, you know what? It's a big Tuesday. I thought, you know what?
Trade deadline day. It's a huge
trade
Tuesday.
Deadline day. Maction is back tonight. I'm stoked for that. So I thought, you know what, I'm gonna celebrate. I still don't know. Braden hasn't told me not to drink on the broadcast yet. So I probably need to follow up with him and make sure.
Don't ask for permission, cool. Ask for forgiveness. That's
I just do it all the time.
I'm drinking water out of my cup. This is delicious. Okay.
I've got some water over here too. Yeah, stay hydrated.
Stay hydrating as well. All right, let's talk about a little bit of this game because the Titans did, in fact, win a game this weekend. And as Joey says here in the comments, even after a win, I just feel dead inside and disappointed. That was not a good team win, as some of the players exclaimed. That was barely beating the worst team in the league. And while I would agree with you, Dan, you're also here saying, you know, my car is rattling more than the 04 bubbled up tinted Ultima intro time, baby. Love it. Love to see it.
Club Hot Read in the house.
Club Hot Read here. The Titans do get a win, and I think, you know, some of the decisions that were made in that game can still be pretty, I would say, contested, highly contested, and there are varying opinions on how Brian Callahan coached this game as he continues to work his way through his first season. Obviously, you talk about the tipped pass that becomes an interception on the goal line. Should have been 14-0, I believe, at the time. Yeah. This is a game that I wrote about. Really, when you look at it, the score is not indicative of how this game was run. The Titans pretty much controlled it from start to finish. And outside of a miraculous final second play where, I mean, Drake May, good God, man. That was I was so amazed to see that from the press box. It was right, like I'm right on that end zone line right there. Being able to watch that with my own two eyes, and then as he flings that ball up to Ramondre Stevenson, the look, the jaw dropping from every single media member on the first row there was maybe one of the most priceless moments I've ever seen in my entire life. I will cherish it forever.
It was wild.
Yeah, it was wild, but the Titans did, for the majority of this game, controlled this game, and you saw that play out, especially in overtime. I mean, the way that they let play complimentary football all the way up until the last buzzer, because of course something happens to this 2024 Titans team, but they didn't let that stop them. They make a very methodical, effective drive down the field with Mason Rudolph to score 3 there, and then kind of force Drake May to do some more heroics, which end up working in the Titans' favor with Amani Hooker's second interception of the game. Like, that was as much as the score does not, doesn't explain it, that was a win that, even though this team doesn't execute like a Super Bowl contender, they finally executed. And I think that's the biggest thing here. Proof of concept, which I think Brian Callahan wanted to harp on in his post-game presser, as well as on Monday. The fact that this team, like, we have not seen them play complimentary football all season.
No.
And the fact that they were finally able to do it, I think, is the biggest victory lap you can take from this game.
Yeah, I think one of the things that has been so disappointed about the way they've been losing games this season is just seeing the offense kind of sputter, and then seeing the defense in the second half kind of tire out. And, it raised questions. I don't think we can say definitively one way or the other, but it at least raised questions like, are these guys on defense feeling the pressure to carry the team and ultimately cracking when the pressure gets to be too much? That's been a narrative about this team this season. But in this game, what you really saw were the units helping each other out. And I can't remember if it was Brian Callahan or if it was one of the players that mentioned it, but the offense would miss a play. There was a turnover, and the defense would say, it's all right, we'll pick you back up. The defense gives up a touchdown. The offense says, no problem, we'll just go down here and punch one in. The complementary football aspect of it and the real unity of the team that you saw in the execution of this game was like the first time this season that I really felt this team was not going to quit. Like this team was going to fight until the end. And this was a desperate situation where they had to have the win, and they weren't going to leave the field without one. And that was just awesome to watch. It was awesome to watch the offensive line impose its will in overtime, and for Calvin Ridley to make clutch catches on that overtime drive, one where he's just getting sandwiched between two Patriots defenders, holds on to the ball. That was awesome. I think, and people kind of took their jabs at me on Sunday morning when I said, like, I could see this being a blowout for the Titans. If they go up 14-0, I think there's a moment in that game where it does come pretty close to this being a blowout in favor of the Titans. And even after they turned that ball over, they still had some chances to go up big, and they didn't execute. But when the time came to get things right, to really nut up or shut up, they rose to the occasion and they gutted it out. And I think to see the team fight like that, to me, is the most impressive part of it, even though they let what could have been a convincing win, perhaps even a blowout, even though they let that kind of sift through their fingertips, they still rallied around one another and they pulled off the win. And, I know the Patriots aren't good. I came on this show on Friday and I said, I can see why Gerard Mayo called this team soft. That's a pretty damning thing to say about a football team. I did not think that they were very good, but at the same time, they're in a similar position as the Titans were. Jobs are on the line. Things are not going well. People are starting to get a little antsy. They needed the win too. They were desperate for this win too. It wasn't just like they were going to go out there and lie down for the Titans. This was a team that I felt was giving a pretty good effort. Drake May was doing everything that he could to put that team on his back and win that game, and he was damn near successful at it, but Amani Hooker slams the door shut. So while we can sit here and say, like, yeah, it's the worst team in football, I think context matters. I think the situation matters, and the situation was that this team was just as desperate for a win as the Titans were, and to me, that's a box that I check in favor of the Titans, that they can sort of hold off that sort of resistance and still get the job done.
Yeah, and I think it answered certainly some questions about what the Titans have been able to do so far this season. Like the proof of concept one is one that they can play the bare minimum of football. As someone said here in the comments, it's proof you can get it all moving in one direction, because it seems like they either go into a brick wall or they go right into the opponent's end zone. Like that, like the fact that they can finally actually do what they need to do to execute on the field is now the box that's checked off. I still do think there are a lot of questions that remain even after this game. One being the question of, can Brian Callahan be the head coach and also play call, is one that has been highly contested so far this week, even after the win. And it has to do with a lot of this very interesting tweet that Seth Walder put out. I guess not interesting, but it is a tweet that he put out when the Titans decided not to go for it on 4th and 3 right at the end zone to take the 7 points and instead take the field goal. And Seth Walder puts out that it was a big 4th down error by Brian Callahan. Win percentage here. So if they were to go for it on 4th and 3 and convert, the win percentage would go up to 56.4. Field goal percentage, if they were to go for the field goal, their win percentage would be 52.1%. So the recommendation was go, because it gives you 4.3 percentage points on your win probability. And so for me, I don't buy this, as people were hammering Brian Callahan that, once again, this is a team that talks up a big game here with analytics, but then continue not to go for it. There's a difference between, first of all, let's listen to what Brian Callahan has to say about this decision, because I think it is important that Brian Callahan is not necessarily not listening to the analytics. It's just that their analytics can be different. Their department can be different from what an ESPN database has. And so here's what he had to say about the decision to not go for it on 4th and 3 and kick the field goal.
Longer, it ended up being a full 3. And so at that point, I think that was to take, what was that, to go up 10-7? Just to take the lead after a long drive. Sometimes those are deflating too when you don't take the points. And just again, a lot of it was how our defense had played and hadn't given them much. So, but yeah, 4th and 2 would have been a go. We were 4th and 3, so I decided to kick it.
And so, I think their model, I find no problem with that personally. If their model said, do not go for it on anything over than 4th and 2, get the points. Because, and the point I was going to make before that clip, we talk about how much analytics are a new part of the Titans, but you still can't take that situational feel out of a game. That matters a whole heck of a lot. And when you have a team like you're playing against the Patriots, where you are dominating, and you're playing against a Drake May who you're getting pressure on consistently, and this guy's making mistakes, and you're really not letting him do much, except maybe we'll get to it. Ding, ding, ding. JT was right all along about the Titans just ignoring Drake May's running. We can talk about that in a second.
It's on my list.
But like, this is a team that was able to get stops consistently and kind of control the tide. And so, like I said, also, I feel like situational feel also has to matter in these games. And I'll bring up last night's game against the Buccaneers and the Kansas City Chiefs, where Todd Bowles decides at the end of regulation not to go for it, go for 2 there against the Kansas City Chiefs at Arrowhead. Patrick Mahomes gets the ball, and that's the end of the story there. Like, that to me is another situational feel moment where it feels like Todd Bowles, you have to go for it there.
Yeah.
Like you're away team against an undefeated team. Like, you have to go for the gut punch there. And if you don't, like, I don't think, just like in this situation, like that, if you weren't going to make it, that's a more understanding reason as to why you went for it than if Brian Callahan goes for it on 4th and 3 there and doesn't convert. And people are like, well, why did you not just take the points? Because this team needs a win and you aren't able to do it. Like that's where the disconnect is here for me. And I think at the end of the day, once again, I think that's a very reasonable answer from Brian Callahan in his post-game presser. And it shows me once again that this is a team that is taking in all aspects of the game, between Brian Callahan looking at his analytical models and just overall getting a feel for the game and how his team is performing. And this is a guy who executed, I think, to the best of his abilities and is nowhere near over his head on decision making like this.
Yeah, I would agree. I was about to say the same exact thing. Like, damn sure doesn't sound like a guy that's in over his head to me. This is a transparent, honest answer about why he went for it, and he won the game. He won the game. Like, bottom line, like, he made the decision and they won the game. I will say, our buddies Easton Freeze and Zach Lyons have been fighting the good fight about this analytics discussion this week, pointing out that Seth's model doesn't take into account that the Titans had a backup guard in, they had a backup center in the game. Yep. I think there's further context to what Brian Callahan was saying about, well, the defense had been playing great. Like, you take the points in this situation. It's the safer bet, and you trust your defense, all that stuff. But I also think something else that he said this week kind of rung true it stuck with me when I was thinking about the decision that we're discussing here now. He talked about a moment in a game when I don't remember exactly which play he's referring to, but something happened, and he said, I thought to myself, oh no, here comes the negative stuff again.
Yeah.
If you go for this touchdown and this spot and you don't convert, then you and your decision alone is opening up the door for the negative stuff to start happening. And you don't want to do that if you're coaching to win this game. You have to win this game. I thought Brian Callahan demonstrated an understanding of what it would take to win that game, and he was proven right.
Yeah, and so at the end of the day, I think this was, in my opinion, and I think for you as well, this is a game that was pretty well coached by a guy who this team simply needed a win. No matter how ugly it got, this team needed a win. You could see it on his face afterwards. But
well, I think, and to expand upon that a little bit, JT, I think that a lot of that has been there this season. The difference has been the players rising up to the moment and executing. And I think that was the difference in this game, is that Brian Callahan had done a lot of the stuff that he'd done prior to this point, and he's still getting his feet beneath him as a head coach, as a play caller. I get that. I'm not saying he's perfect, but he did a lot of the same stuff in this game that he did before. And the difference was that the light bulb seemingly went off for a lot of these players, and they played together in this game as well. And I think it just rewarded everybody with just an organizational win, just from top to bottom. Everybody was popping champagne celebrating that one.
Yeah, and so Spencer says here in the comments, gotta have a marriage of feel and analytics. Yes. Seemingly Callie has shown that. I think so. And that brings up, like, well, once again, real quick, sorry, the decision here with the Buffalo game, where you go for it at the beginning of that half, 4th and 2, you don't get it, but your defense has been playing so well, and that's another instance where, like, you were relying on your defense to continue putting the pressure on Josh Allen, but they couldn't because they did not execute. This is a game where you felt like you were executing every single time, no matter what. And so I feel like that also plays a big part into it.
Yeah. And I agree with Spencer's take here. You do got to have a marriage of feel and analytics. I think the point I was going to raise is that earlier in the season, there might have been an argument. I remember some talking points on Sports Talk and all the podcast circle. I can remember people talking about, well, he's too reliant upon analytics. There's no feel for the game. But I think in this game, you saw that there was a pretty good marriage between feel and analytics from Brian Callahan, and that should be encouraging if you're one of the people that thought he was just a numbers guy, too reliant upon analytics earlier in the season. This is a point where, if you believe that argument, you can point to this and say this is a sign of progress, that our head coach is growing into the leader that it takes to guide this franchise forward.
Yeah, and another comment here, Hingle saying definite difference between Titans OT game plan and Tampa Bay OT game plan is about realizing if they're going to get another opportunity. Titans had faith they'd get another shot, while Tampa Bay was scared to go for the win, which I think plays into the situational result there. All right, Stoney, I think it's time for you to unload the notebook, because I know you have a lot of things that you wanted to point out, some good things, some bad things from this game, and some observations that you had from a win over New England. So without further ado, let's see some of those observations from your notebook.
Well, just a couple of things that we haven't talked about just yet. I do want to talk about special teams a little bit, because I think it's telling. Easton wrote a really good article on A to Z Sports about the calls on special teams. Zach has talked about it on Cover 2 on 104.5 The Zone this week. And I just want to bring that to light for any of our listeners that might not be caught up on that. Brian Callahan did mention in his media availability earlier this week that the league has gotten a couple of calls wrong and apologized for them. And I know he's gotten in some pretty good trouble for that, hefty fine on that. But I think it's worth repeating to the fan base because we've all wanted to run Colt Anderson out of town, and it's not Colt Anderson's fault that the officials are not calling the game correctly. So I think maybe we can cut him a little bit of slack. And also, I watched the special teams tape. I watched the punt blocks or the punt returns, and tried to get a read on what was going on there. And I really didn't think it was all that bad. It was the same as what we've talked about on offense, where you've got like 10 guys doing their job, and then Otis Reese lunges at a rusher and his feet and just completely gets around him and almost gives up a punt block. So it's a similar sort of thing, but it's not all bad. And they've had to move off of their original gunners because they need Nick Westbrook-Akine and Jarvis Brownlee playing on offense and defense. They put those guys in late in the game, and the Patriots double teamed them. The Patriots have a pretty good special teams unit. And I will close my note on special teams by saying, if you catch a punt and the closest guy to you is 22 yards away, you're in a good spot. And the team trying to cover you is not in a good spot. So again, we go back to Ryan Stonehouse. Got to get that ball up in the air a little bit longer and give your team that. I mean, you're talking about guys like Otis Reese, Josh Wiley, Jalen Harrell, James Williams. Like, these are not like, it's not Tyreek Hill out here running down the field on special teams. You got to give these guys a chance to get down there. And I think if that improves, I think Colt Anderson's seat will cool off a little bit.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Any thoughts on the special teams before we move on?
It really is not something I want to comment on until we talk to Colt Anderson, because I feel like that's a huge part of the process. Like, I can also say that, yes, the league has done some things bad. It's still unacceptable. I'm kind of saying JT's riding way, way too high on the locker room vibes of this Patriots win. I don't think I am. I still think this team is not very good. I'm just happy for them to finally stop being so sad and miserable, because I think they deserve, because they've been trying to execute, and they finally, good for them. Like, I do think they're good. But like you said, special teams, still not good. I'm sure whatever you're about to bring up, because I know we're going to talk about it here, not good. Like, well,
no, this is a good one. I just want to get this note out of the way, and then
thanks for ruining.
And then we can talk about the note that I have that's not good, because I do have one that's not good. I just want to say props to Bill Callahan as this team's run game coordinator. This blocking scheme is complicated. It's like a hungry hippos board when all them things chomping and balls just bouncing all over the place. You got tight ends moving here. You got wide receivers in motion. They put John Ajuku in motion in this game. You got guys moving all over the place. It's a lot to keep up with. And there are many plays that it really does come down to just one block. And if they hit that one block, it springs like a 25-yard run. If they don't, I mean, they're at the end of that game, they're still picking up, like, they're still churning 5 yards anyway. Like, they're positive runs. But I thought that he really did a good job designing this run game, and you're starting to see the guys get it and execute it better. And you're talking about the offensive linemen, the tight ends, the running backs, the wide receivers. It's been so impressive to see him get everybody involved in this run game. And I'm happy for Tony Pollard that he finally got that 100-yard game off 28 carries, had a touchdown called back. It could have been an even more prolific game for him. But this run game, man, if they play consistently like they did in overtime, this is going to be a menace. This is going to be a hard unit to stop moving forward.
Yeah, I like I said, we're halfway through the season. Like, it's still very plausible that, like I asked Mason Rudolph after the game, like, did it feel like with this scheme in the operation of the offense, has it felt like, since it is all very new, has it only just been a matter of time before it would click? And Mason said, yeah, we did not. I mean, I think you can look at the tape. It's been a pretty jumbled mess of a lot of different ideas, and it has taken some time to hone in on what this team does really well. And I think that relying on the run game is one of those. And so, yeah, I would agree with you that Bill Callahan you know, like I think he's doing a lot of good things here for this team for sure. And I think, you know, you can talk about the offensive line and how much are they improving? As kind of says, I won't be all doom and gloom. The offensive line still continues to progress. Like Peter Skoronski, for better or for worse, looked good on Sunday. Like he did not cause the issues that we've seen from Peter Skoronski in the past couple of weeks. Like that's been good. JC Latham, I feel like we haven't talked about him, and that's probably a good thing that we're not talking about JC Latham. It means that he's playing serviceable ball in his first 8 games of his career. Like that's good things here. And so yeah, I like what Bill Callahan's doing right now.
Yeah, agreed. And I thought Corey Levin, high snaps aside, played a pretty good game. I hate to see Lloyd Cushenberry lost to the season. Daniel Brunskill has been kind of a running joke on this show. He's been their second best offensive lineman this season, but now he's getting a chance with the Dylan Radins injury. He'll either be right guard, maybe center, depending on what Radins' status is. And then they keep this revolving door at right tackle going. But man, it worked. It worked on Sunday. Like
I understand that that's how they want to do it, but how much consistency can you really get from a right tackle who's not who's playing every other drive or every 2 other drives? Like I don't know if maybe it is conducive to his success, and maybe that's why he's the expert, right? Because getting John Njoku out there just for one and letting him rest and then getting him back to full power or something like that with Leroy Watson as well. Maybe that's the way to do it, because these guys are not built to prolong 7-8 drives in a game. Maybe that's what it is, but I don't buy it yet. But yeah, no, for the most part, I feel like it's been pretty good.
Yeah. And then the last thing I wanted to bring up was the preparedness of this defense. Like I have a major question. And I don't see Denard Wilson catching a lot of flack. Everybody wants to fire Brian Callahan and make Denard Wilson the head coach. But man, this is the second time this season that I've kind of felt like the defense was really unprepared for what the quarterback does well. And the first was Malik Willis, the Green Bay Packers game. I didn't really feel like they had that matchup scouted well at all. And then the comments from Arden Key that you brought up last week about Drake May not being mobile just sent me into a panic. And then they took the field on Sunday, and lo and behold, they played the damn game like Drake May couldn't take off and run. And what did he end up with? Like 80-something rushing yards?
95 yards. He had 95 rushing yards.
Extending plays. And I'm sitting there watching this like, hot damn, JT was onto something with this, and they just look completely unprepared for Drake May's escapability and his ability with his legs. And I think that's kind of alarming that we've seen that twice now against Drake May and against Malik Willis earlier in the season. I think it's fair to point to that and say, you know, we got to be critical about this now. Like, what's going on in the film room that we're not seeing that Drake May can make plays with his leg?
Yeah. I mean, believe me, when we get to talk to the coordinators on Thursday,
you gonna grill them?
I will be present. I will be present because I am curious. Like, it's not just a thing that, you know, I don't see how, like, it wasn't just Arden Key saying a one-off comment, because when you watch the game on Sunday and you watch Drake May drop back and you watch the linebackers drop into coverage, you see Drake May get moved out of the pocket and start to look like he's about to run, and there's nobody trying to pick him up, and they just let him run. Like, it really does feel like either they didn't prepare or they felt good about their game plan to the point of, we'll just let the kid run. Like, and if either way, it's not good. You talk about a team that 20 carries for 110 yards and a touchdown. Drake May had 8 of those 20 carries for 95 of 110 yards. Like that, hearing from Arden Key that says we're not worried about him running, and then him being 95% of the run yards, doesn't make sense to me. So I'm hoping to hear more about that on Thursday or the rest of this week, just hearing like from these guys an explanation on that, because
it'd be great.
I mean, Justin Herbert, Justin Herbert, not this week, but the week before, ran for 50 yards on a one run. Like, he's not exactly a statue back there. The week after that, you have Jaden Daniels. Like, this is a team so far that has not shown us that they are able to contain mobile quarterbacks. And so,
yeah, man,
I don't know, maybe that's a problem on this team, and it's something that needs to be addressed. But like I'm with you. There are warning signs here for sure.
Yeah. So that's all I had in the notebook for this game.
Yeah. I mean, they still get their win, but it's not without, like you said, alluding to, not without some guys down for the count here. Lloyd Cushenberry it was reported after the game by Paul Kaharski that he is expected out for the year with an Achilles injury. Tough blow, but I think I as much as he wasn't playing up to his contract, I think he was stable for this Titans line.
There.
So now, it sucks because, the right tackle has been a problem. We talked about how good the core of this unit could be, but we never got to see it. Like even this week, like if Radens was able to play this week, like the proof of concept would be there for this offensive line. And maybe we would have been able to see it just once and go into next season being like, we saw it for like 45 minutes in this game before he went out. It's possible, but no, because I don't think it's the end of the world, though, for Lloyd Cushenberry or for this offensive line with Lloyd Cushenberry out. Like you said, we've been pretty high on Daniel Brunskill being able to block in this offense. And if Dylan Radens can come back, like I feel okay with Daniel Brunskill being the center for this team. And that's really only if Radens can come back this week or the week after, because if it is Daniel Brunskill and Corey Levin, I don't know about that.
Yeah. I don't either. And oh man, I don't even want to think about the possibility of one of those guys going down either.
Yeah, no, okay. Don't worry about that. But then the other one as well, Quandre Diggs suffering a season-ending, what is it, Liz Frank injury during Sunday's game against the Patriots. He is done. And so the Titans have made corresponding moves today, signed to the practice squad. Thomas Odukoya is back. Welcome, Thomas O. Javarius Owens, a safety, was signed to the roster today, seeming to be a corresponding move to that one as well. Cole Spencer, welcome back. Maybe this is maybe it is a good thing if we got to bring Cole Spencer back, so we get to see what he is. And then also Daryl Worley is signed to the practice squad as well. So interesting moves here corresponding. Certainly not great. Quandre Diggs, to be honest, like Quandre Diggs might have been a guy, if he was not hurt, that would have been possibly moved today to a contender, kind of like we saw the Buffalo Bills release Mike Edwards today. Like that's another cornerback / secondary guy that they let go. Like Quandre Diggs would have been them, probably could have seen him move to a contender. But I mean, it just sucks. Mainly like Quandre, obviously a rental, but to not have Lloyd continue to develop with the interior of this line sucks for a year in transition.
Yeah, and I think Quandre was playing pretty well too. I think he gave him a pretty stable floor at the safety position between he and Amani Hooker, Amani Hooker's having a damn good season so far. I think more people need to be talking about him too, but just brutal. I think Mike Brown played pretty well in relief of Diggs, but I'm curious as to how he's going to maintain as the season goes on if he stays in that role.
Yeah, no, I agree there as well.
And if he does take on a starter role, well, then what we've seen from this team is that if you're playing heavy snaps on offense or defense, you're not going to be playing on special teams. And he's kind of one of their core special teamers right now. So they'd be down another horse on special teams too. So it's just all peachy.
Yeah, no, not, can only be happy for so long because the Titans will end up having to play a pretty good Chargers team right now that seems to be rolling with how weird their team makeup is, but they have some good momentum there, and Titans end up being an 8.5-point underdog to start that game. We'll talk a lot more about that on Friday, including the Will Levis versus Mason Rudolph debate, which I'm sure will be a huge one for the rest of the week. But I think that's going to do it for us today. I thought that was a very good conversation. Remember, if you're watching with us, thank you for being here until the end. Hit like, hit subscribe. Those things do a lot for the channel, either on 440 Sports or Broadway Sports Media. We appreciate you guys doing so. If you are listening to this in post on Spotify, Apple, any of your podcast platforms, make sure to give us a follow, 5-star rating, like the podcast, share it with a friend who is also celebrating a middling Titans win this week. And until Friday, where we talk about this upcoming game, this has been the Hot Read Podcast. We will talk to you then.
James Lynch